Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about Jesus and Buddha. While most Americans are familiar with Christianity, it seems fair to say that few know much of anything about Buddhism. In contrast, our friends in the Confederation have said quite a bit about the entities known as Jesus and Buddha, largely in terms of balancing energies of love and wisdom. How can our understanding of these two entities and what they taught us help us all in our spiritual growth and evolution? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, and Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's available and interested is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com. You can get on our mailing list. We send out weekly updates with the Zoom links and let you know what we're talking about that week. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean of the L&L Research Channeling team. Just hit the subscribe button if you want to get notifications when we upload new podcast episodes about once a week, and email us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to join in our Q&A session sometime. As mentioned, our episode today is about Jesus and Buddha, and today we are lucky and blessed to be joined once again by our good friend, Mr. Gabriel Lugo. Gabe describes himself as a non-dual mentor, helping seekers of self-realization through the direct path. He has been strongly influenced by Zen Buddhist traditions as well as the Law of One. And as many of our viewers probably know already, Gabe has a YouTube channel with many great videos about the Law of One that have helped many folks greatly in their spiritual growth and evolution. How are you doing today, Gabe?
I'm doing fantastic, Jonathan. Just happy to be with you again, like you said. And yeah, just grateful that you create the space for us, for everybody that is interested in these topics that we talk about, this understanding, this path that it is. So yeah, I'm always happy to stand here with you and get into these conversations, man.
Such a joy to have you. Yeah, I believe the last time we had you here, the podcast episode was on reality, and that was almost exactly 2 months ago. So are you ready to do a deep dive into the reality of those entities known as Jesus and Buddha?
Oh, I'm excited. Yes, these are the two big influences that we have. And yeah, by far the most important ones, I think, in mystical teachings.
Definitely agree. They have been big parts of my life and many people's lives, I guess. Just want to reassure our viewers that neither of us here know everything there is to know about Buddha or Jesus, and anything we can say could be wrong. You are welcome to disagree with anything that we say today. For our viewers, if you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Kuo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on Jesus. If you are not familiar with either of those, here are a few things that will help everything else that we say today make a little bit more sense. What is the Law of One? You could think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one, and that one thing is love. Pretty much everything else that we say today is going to be, in some way, some variation of that statement. Should know that all of the readings that we look at today came through the process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, and so on. A channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through, and in this case, those entities appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling that have been used by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state. They are subconscious or unconscious as if asleep, meaning they are not aware of what words they are saying. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra back in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but very deep meditative state, meaning they are only somewhat aware of what words are coming out of their mouth. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Kuo, starting in 1986 and up to present day. So, who is Quo? You can think of Quo as a group entity made up of three social memory complexes. There is Ra at sixth density, Latui at fifth density, and Hatan at fourth density. Social memory complex you could think of as a planetary consciousness. It would be as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one consciousness. What are densities? You can think of densities as different levels of consciousness, different levels of reality. Imagine that the elements of water, air, fire, and earth had some basic form of consciousness, whatever that is. We call that first density. You can think of second density as the consciousness of animals and plants, clearly a quantum leap above the consciousness of inanimate matter like water and earth. You can think of third density as the density of consciousness of humans and cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a quantum leap above the level of consciousness of lower animals and plants. You can think of fourth density as the level of consciousness of social memory complexes, again, as if the entire human population was merged into one single consciousness. Again, clearly a quantum leap. Fifth density would be whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above fourth density, and sixth density would be whatever would be a comparable leap above that. That is something that is beyond our level of understanding at that point. But suffice it to say that Quo appears to be a group entity made up of three planetary consciousnesses at fourth, fifth, and sixth density. First contact with Quo was made back in 1986 by the L&L research channeling team, almost 2 years after the end of the raw contact in 1984. And they have been channeled every month since then up to present day by the L&L research channeling team. You can find transcripts in the L&L conscious channeling library. Gabe, anything I missed? Anything you want to add in the way of background information for what we're doing today?
No, no, not from this perspective. I think you covered extensively all of this.
Sounds good. So why don't we start? Let's take a look at the entity known as Jesus. I have a few passages that I would love to get your thoughts and reflections on, Gabe. Starting with this one, this was from January 7th, 1990. The entity known as Quo said, "The phenomenon known to you as Jesus is a principle of the Logos, or love, that has moved through the densities as any other entity, but was created slightly differently than those of you who swim beneath the sea of confusion. This entity also wished to live a life that was a poem to the Creator, and again, on planet after planet, this entity comes into incarnation with a special character of partial remembrance. In other words, this entity contains more of the Logos, or love, than free will, whereas each of you contain the bonding of love and free will, against which you must challenge yourself to find a unity of being. This entity was a good teacher of the message of the law of one. Again and again, the message is misunderstood. Again and again, the Creator sends forth that special part of itself which retains the consciousness of unconditional love rather than having it disappear beneath the veil. This entity has helped many, many civilizations." This passage is just so fascinating to me, if for no other reason, the understanding that Jesus has incarnated again and again on planet after planet and has helped many, many civilizations. That is just so fascinating to me. Any thoughts, reflections on anything here, Gabe?
Yeah, so I I think I want to preface my interventions and opinions, my view in general, that in the background of my worldview, I fail to see entities as a definite thing, right? So to me, I think the beginning of this excerpt, especially, well, particularly the first paragraph when they call Jesus a phenomenon, right? because I fail to see it. It's just not congruent with me, the idea that there are entities, but rather that entities are the perspective of separation. I I don't see an entity called Jesus reincarnating over and over again, but rather the principle of unconditional love, which is present in all of us, to a certain degree, much more pronounced in um, an entity, because we can call, things entity. We can call our thoughts entities, right? Every single thought is an entity. So again, this is still part of my preface for every single contribution that I can possibly give to these excerpts. And particularly because we're talking about channel material, which is often regarded as different entities that are communicating with us. And again, while this is something that in consensual reality is helpful for communication, ultimately it's not true. There are no such thing as separate entities communicating with us, but rather there are thought entities that are made available to the conscious mind. And we can get, more into that if you want to, the way I see it. But this helps me actually relate a little bit better with what we call Jesus and Buddha as something that is part of the wholeness of being that we all represent. So in this particular case, the way I see it is that you see the part when they say that this entity contains more of the logos or love than free will, whereas each and one of us contain the bonding of love and free will, which is a sort of, mix and balance that makes us authentic, right? Um, so the phenomenon called Jesus is simply the extreme expression of love as the logos. Yes. And the idea that it may reincarnate over and over again is because that phenomenon obviously has been created as part of the manifestation of this reality. And that particular experience continues to evolve and be more imbued with the experience of love in each uh, incarnation, if you will. I hope this is making sense because I'm going a little bit all over the place, but I just wanted to set up first.
I think so. I have never thought of it that way, so I'm not totally sure I'm understanding your reasoning completely. But I think I am certainly agreeing that this thought form or entity, however you want to say it, that we refer to as Jesus, certainly was a more pure form of this principle or this logos of love than your typical person or entity or thought form who incarnates. I think that is certainly something that sets this particular wanderer form separate from other wanderers who tend to forget more of that original logos that they came from. Am I getting the gist of what you were saying correctly, or am I missing?
You know, that's precisely what I'm saying. I think the reason why I like to make these observations is that we kind of alleviate a little bit more the necessity to see things as separate beings, but also to see that each entity, each expression of manifestation is rather a particular, very unique expression of the infinite potentials that exist for consciousness to express and be itself, right? So when I see Jesus as a representative is an extreme manifestation of unconditional love. And so we can gauge these things in terms of so-called spiritual people, right, that exhibit a lot of love or maybe a lot of wisdom. And the vast majority of us are sort of balancing between these two, some a little bit more pronounced than others. But these are just, let's say, unequivocal part of ourselves that we all have, right? Love and wisdom, right? Love and light. And sometimes there are expressions of this intense love or of this intense wisdom. And because they're so pure, we, they stand out. The vast majority of us are just a balance in between these two. And it's not even a balance. I would say it's just an arrangement of these two that makes us all unique. And that's what it is to discover yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think what you were just saying was reminding me of that first part of the second paragraph where they say, this entity was a good teacher of the law of one. And again, the message is misunderstood, perhaps because that entity was such a pure form of love that people at that time really just couldn't understand it. Clearly, people these days are having a hard time understanding the concept of unconditional love as well.
Yeah, I think we overcomplicate things. I mean, I don't, and what I say may be misconstrued as, being too dismissive, but pure love, okay, great. That he was an expression of pure love. Let's not put him on a pedestal, you know?
For
That's an
sure.
expression of pure love. Great. Thank you for showing that, We do need it. But yeah, let's not put it on a pedestal, and also let's not dismiss it as something, trivial. It's there, and it's like seeing anything in nature. Beautiful on its own. It's the only time you'll see something like that, and that's it. There
I think the
everything
only
else is
reason
just
perhaps that people did put him on a pedestal is because he really channeled that principle of love and creator so purely that people who were in his presence really believed that they were in the presence of God, in the presence of the deity and the creator. And that's something that, I mean, it's true. All of us are the one infinite creator. Each of us is creator. And yet I've never had anybody like confuse me with God in particular. It's fairly obvious that I'm a more distorted form, I guess, perhaps than others.
you see, that's
Um,
what I'll disagree, Jonathan. You mind if I disagree with
yeah,
you?
of course. Please.
Because that's the thing. As long as we have a concept of God, right, being very loving, being wise, then everybody else is not God. That's the problem that we're finding. And that's what I'm trying to alleviate here, because being God is just being, or rather, God is being. There's nothing else. So you see how we, as society, tend to put, because we create a label of what it is. And here's the thing. As humans, we always look at things that are different. And that which is different, then, oh my God, that must be, because it's different than us. So we kind of bypass our own confusion to put that on a pedestal. And
Mhm.
no mystical teacher has ever said, yo, yeah, I'm a pure expression of God. You're not,
Right.
we all are. You're just not seeing it in yourself. And you got to see it in everybody else. Otherwise, you're missing the mark, or
Right.
you're sinning. You're missing
Right.
it.
And I would like to think Jesus agreed with you on that. I don't think Jesus wanted to be worshipped or put on a pedestal in particular. I suppose, like everything else, it depends which passages you choose to take out of the Bible to support that. But I would say for sure, from a law of one perspective, he was trying to just show that everyone has that potential, that everyone is, in fact, the creator, and there is no reason to set him apart or separate from anyone else. So I
Can I
definitely,
can I just say something really quick? And
yeah,
I don't, it's just that I get so excited when I see these opportunities.
yeah.
Um, you see what it is? What we appreciate from Jesus, there's two things. One, obviously, that he was pure love. Two, that he was being himself. Anybody who is himself has an authenticity. They're so genuine that it's attractive. You see, it's immediately something that, wow, people are attracted to. So when you are yourself, it doesn't matter if you're, half loving, half wisdom, or whatever, it might be that we want to measure that. That's more important than anything else. Whatever the balance may be, that's great. But then we have the added effect that I said, humans are very interested in those things that are exaggerated, that's really stand out. So in this case, we're talking about two big principles, which is love, and we'll get to wisdom with Buddha, but love, wow, that stands even more. So somebody who is pure love and it's being itself, my God, they're going to make an impact in the world. So he did.
Indeed. Well said. If it's okay with you, I wanted to do a little follow-up on this particular passage. Again, as I mentioned, when I first read this passage and saw that idea that this guy who seems so important on Earth has in fact incarnated on many, many planets and helped many, many civilizations, I was curious about that. I did send in a question to our friends at L&L asking for clarification on that. I've sent quite a few questions in, and they've only asked a few of them in channeling sessions, but this was one where they did. So the question that I sent in said, in a session on January 7th, 1990, you said that the entity we refer to as Jesus Christ has lived again and again on planet after planet and has helped many, many civilizations. Understanding the need for you not to unduly influence our free will decisions related to Christianity or Christians on Earth, can you share with us some stories of how the entity we know as Jesus incarnated on other planets? And do they often involve crosses and or crucifixions? So this passage that I'm about to read through was part of their response to that question. And they began, this is quote, began by saying, "You have asked a query which is fascinating to us, as it is the path of the martyr, the path of the one who lays down his life for those that are in darkness and whose need to see the light. This entity is what you would refer to as a wanderer, who has incarnated many times upon many third density planets for the purpose of sharing, most especially, the love of the one infinite creator with those whom it sought to teach and to become a way shower, for through many incarnations that it chose as a specialty of its beingness. This type of service is somewhat unlike what most wanderers offer as their own particular specialties when they answer the call of a third density planet to serve in some manner, to provide more light, more love, and illumination to the population of that planet, so that the veil of forgetting of the third density experience may in some fashion be penetrated and allow more of the nature of the unified creation to be perceived by those whom the wanderer seeks to aid, if it is able to remember its mission within the troubled times and the nature of the third density experience." The one known as Jesus was able many times to answer a call from a third density planet that was dwelling in what you might see as metaphysical darkness. Such a population is at the beginning stages of determining the purpose of your life experience, and in many cases is not able to find a clear path of understanding of the nature of the personal and group incarnated energy expenditures, as you may call them. It is in such a situation that one such as Yehoshua, as he is most often known in the metaphysical realms, is able to offer itself as a way shower, as one who has traveled this path many times itself, and who wishes to share the fruits of this journey with those who are just beginning the journey. This oftentimes results in what you may call various degrees of sacrifice, which is shown or represented by what you have called the cross, the intersection of one direction upward into the heavens with the intersection of the horizontal plane of the earth that is able to be transcended by those who understand and practice the principles of service to others to the extent that they give all that they have, the life experience, the joys, the sorrows, the purpose of being, in order to exemplify the sacrifice of the earthly perceptions and even the earthly life for the one known as Jehoshua, so that others may see there is more, much more to the life experience than has ever been perceived before becoming aware of the teachings of the one known as Yehoshua. Yeah, really fascinating passage. And as we will see, I think part of what really fascinates me most about this entity, this wanderer, this way shower, is the connections that we see in terms of sacrifice and transformation to the archetypical mind of our logos, which I think we're going to get into in a few passages after this. But for now, yeah, I think I really am captivated by the idea that this entity was a way shower and that was apparently his specialty as a wanderer. He has a specialty in going to third density planets that are fairly early in the process and showing them that, if I'm understanding this right, there's a lot more to this life and this reality that we think, and showing them the way to it through unconditional love for others, so much that you're willing to sacrifice what you see as everything there is physically in order to show that there is much more to it than that. Any thoughts, reflections on anything here, Gabe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, I think the most beautiful way I can perceive this is as one single experience. And if we can nerd a little bit about the veil of forgetting, knowing that this is somewhat of a recent uh, addition to the experiment of this octave, of this life, or this experience that we're having, it seems like this the the phenomenon called Jesus, the expression of unconditional love, um, seen in whichever way, uh, might have been expressed in all these different experiences or incarnations, is first is a given. It's almost like this was necessary to happen, uh, because once we establish a veil of forgetting, a limitation in terms of perception of reality, then one of the things that obviously is going to show up is the unconditional love that awareness has, that being has. But yeah, no, when I was getting at, particularly with the veil of forgetting, it just setting this up in a way that makes sense. Without the veil, there is no need for pure love to be expressed in such an intensity because it's available for everybody. It's just a matter of tapping into it, right? But a veil that we're so familiar with which, we can corroborate that it's very difficult for us to see beyond separation, that it actually requires so much discipline to begin to integrate this one understanding of no separation, right? It seems like the need for love, and I'm talking about just the general experience of the octave, if you want to use this model, right? There is a huge need to express this love. So I see the phenomenon known as Jesus as an extreme expression of love that was almost inevitable. And once that expression happened, then the need for that through the different experiences, which we call planets, third densities, under the veil, it just makes sense, that it's going to travel, so to speak. It's going to manifest itself. I wouldn't call it traveling. I think that's a very human thing, but manifesting in the creation everywhere, especially because everything being uh, simultaneous is just going to happen and shine, let's say, everywhere. So that's the way I see it. And once again, I think I just can't reconcile uh, the language to call this an entity, because to me that is not an entity. It's almost like dividing yourself into parts and saying, my heart, my throat, my eyes, my nose. It's okay, to refer to particular things that belong to us, but this is just something that belongs or is part of the whole. It's just that it expresses itself very brightly, in certain circumstances.
So are you saying that for all incarnated beings, as in you and I, you would not use the word entities to refer to any person?
Well, for consensual reality, yes. I mean, if we're going to talk, I know I can call you Jonathan and I can call myself Gabriel. But in the field of experience, my conviction does not lie in between, you being a separate entity than I am. You
Right.
see, there's just one field of experience, and there's either an understanding or a confusion behind that. And that's really what we're working through in uh, this path, if we can call it that, is just to understand and live more beyond the veil. So beyond the veil, there's just no separation. That's not a conceptual thing that we can put into the mind, but rather a living through. And so this is
Right.
why I take all of these opportunities to, not because it's bad to call ourselves entities, but because it's not completely right or it's not completely correct. So if we can correct the way we speak in our minds about the world, that would make a
Right.
whole difference. So,
Sure.
for consensual reality, like I said, it's it's very helpful. It's convenient to call each other, people, entity, and so on.
Right.
But
But
here in the mind,
outside of consensual reality, do you refer to all of us as phenomena? Is that a perhaps better term to erase some of that separation, distinction between that which
so
is inherently one?
I'll give you a direct example of which everybody can actually relate to. Imagine if we would put the same effort mentally to label all of our thoughts as separate entities and those entities talking to us. It would be insane. We wouldn't be able to have a coherent mind. So we refer to our mind as a single thing. But sometimes we say, I hear voices, I hear this, I hear that. But in reality, all we're hearing is just one single mind. Whatever the thoughts may be, they are coming and going. There's just one mind. You see? So it sounds a little confusing and even maddening, right? Borderline, craziness to say, I am so many beings in my head. It's just, and the experience can be very disturbing, actually, to just refer to ourselves as so many entities. And I'm not talking about channel entities. I'm talking about the singular thoughts that come to our minds. So, in this way, we're trying to reconcile the full world, the whole universe, in an understanding that doesn't differentiate itself, because what it's going to differentiate in your mind is an I thought, which we call the ego or separate self, and other beings, and that's what creates a sort of distance that we yearn for collapsing. You see, there is a
For sure.
primal need to collapse this I thought and the other one. And that yearning, it's called love. It's always present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, and I appreciate it. I think, as is so important, anytime people who haven't really spent a lot of time with each other and who have different words, terms, vocabulary they use for having this kind of conversation, I think it's super important to try to get a good, adequate understanding of the different interpretations we have of perhaps the same words or same concepts. So I appreciate your taking the time to unpack that for me a little bit, because, yeah, it's a new way of looking at what I called entities one way or the other. So I will certainly keep that in mind as we move forward in our conversation. I definitely agree with what you said about the veil of forgetting. I mean, I think that really is a big key part of what this phenomenon we refer to as Jesus was about. As Quo said, this particular phenomenon remembered more on the other side of the veil of forgetting than the rest of us. The rest of us tend to forget who we are. We forget that we're one infinite creator. We forget that all is one. We forget that everything is made up of love. And we forget that, indeed, there is no such thing as separate entities, and that we are all, in fact, one. So that, I would say, is a powerful reminder. If it is okay with you, I would like to take a closer look at this part that I highlighted on the screen, where Quo said this oftentimes results in what you may call various degrees of sacrifice, which is shown or represented by what you have called the cross. There were four archetypes in particular, four images from the archetypical mind or the Egyptian tarot that I think really speak a lot to this idea of sacrifice and transformation, and very much of what Jesus seemed to be about. If it's okay with you, let's start with the potentiator of the mind. In session 93, question 24, and this is edited for brevity, The questioner said, Don, I'd like to know the significance of the shape of the crux ansata. That is that shape that is circled in red, also known as the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol representing life. Ra said, we may indicate that the crux ansata is a part of the concept complexes of the archetypical mind, the circle indicating the magic of the spirit, the cross indicating that nature of manifestation, which may only be valued by the losing. Thus, the crux ansata is intended to be seen as an image of the eternal in and through manifestation and beyond manifestation through the sacrifice and transformation of that which is manifest. So many different layers, I think, here, so many different things to unpack. But I guess the thing that stands out most to me is, again, it's the cross shape that we talked about before and how that seems to be a big part of Jesus or Yehoshua's incarnations on different planets, that there is always some form of sacrifice that's represented by this cross. As they say in the part that I put in blue, the cross indicating that nature of manifestation, which may only be valued by the losing. And I think, as you suggested before, Gabe, I mean, it's not like Jesus is alone in doing this. Every one who incarnates in third density is doing an act of sacrifice simply by incarnating here. And I think that cross, again, just is a really good visual representation of that nature of manifestation that can only be valued by the losing, something that you sacrifice, something that you give. In Jesus' case, everything, his life, his physical being. Do you have any thoughts on this particular archetype and how it may relate to Jesus and or Buddha?
Yeah, I can throw a couple of my views here. So let's talk about sacrifice as something that is relatable to us in this path. So the biggest sacrifice, the true sacrifice actually comes not from actions or activities, things that an entity may do, but rather a change of perception. That is the biggest sacrifice. Because sacrifice is not, I think the word is so imbued with, you know, pain or something that it's sorrowful to go through sacrifice, but I don't see it that way. I think sacrifice is it's a beautiful thing that we can do to embellish even more our perception. Because what we're sacrificing, the biggest sacrifice really is to erode, let's call it erode or eliminate for as much as possible within our conscious mind, the idea of separation. So when it comes to the body, right, and I think that's what stands out the most, is because we're so associated with the body. We believe so much that we are within a body. Even in spiritual circles, this is so prevalent. You see, it's a thing about being in a body, even if it's a spiritual body. So sacrificing absolutely all of this and give your identities to its true source, that is to me the greatest sacrifice. So how does that look in reality? How does that look in experience? Well, it's not something that you do. It's something that takes shape within you as you see through the lens of truth. And the biggest lens of truth is, who are you? Who really are you? What do you mean when you say I? You see? So it's rather an effect that takes place the more we dedicate ourselves to see through the lens of truth. And the biggest lens of truth, or the clearest lens of truth, is the pure awareness that you are. Now, it's fascinating that it's here, of course, in the potentiator, because what does the potentiator does? Well, the conscious mind reaches for it, right? Because it's it's interested it's interested in change and transformation. So it's going to bring up catalyst and experience as it reaches out. And what is the experience that is going to be catalyzed, if not the experience of transformation? Transformation of what? Higher awareness. And a higher awareness is higher awareness of who you truly are. This is what keeps the cycle of the mind rolling and keeps moving in, right? So I think it's beautiful that it's placed there in the potentiator, because the conscious mind needs to sacrifice its perception of separation, which, to the ego or separate self, it always seems terrible. That's why we have these words as dark night of the soul. I love a friend of mine who says it's not a dark night of the soul, it's a dark night of the ego. That's the one that's suffering, that doesn't want to let go of things. Letting go is the most beautiful and amazing thing you can do. You see? So as we reach the potentiator, the sacrifice is inevitable, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be separate and be one at the same time. So you got to choose. What's your choice? That's why, to me, the nature of sacrifice, and Jesus represents this, greatly, because for us, associated so much with the body, I am this body, I feel this body. And we can't deny this. We can't just read a text and say, oh, no, I'm not the body. I'm a spiritual being. No, if you feel the body, then you feel the body. That's who you are. So people like Jesus, who totally sacrifice themselves for their cause, for what they are, then they represent, like, wow, that's the biggest sacrifice. But his sacrifice was already done when he relinquished his identity with the body. So we have some of the Gnostic texts, just to call it a name. It's not, doesn't have to be precisely Gnostic, but most people know and bundle all these texts as Gnostics, where there's a part where Jesus says, he's laughing at his apostles and says, you're all worried about, me dying. It's not me who's going to die. It's the body that's going to die. You see? So, this just keeps showing the detachment that he already had with the body. So that's how I see sacrifice. And, it's something that's happening in everybody's path. The more we give in, to this idea that we are a separate entity.
For sure. Yeah, and that is a beautiful way to look at it that had never crossed my mind as I've looked at this. As you suggested, I think I typically think of sacrifice meaning something that you have to do that's not pleasant, that's difficult, that can be painful in order to get something good. But I certainly never thought of sacrificing your ego, sacrificing your sense of self in order to become one with all. That's a beautiful way, I think, to tie in this image, which I usually associate with Jesus, the cross, but to tie that in with Buddha and the release of ego. Yeah, that's a beautiful teaching. Do you mind if we take a look at a second archetype, another one?
Let's do it.
The experience of the mind. In session 94, question 26, questioner says, I'm guessing that the crossed legs of the entity in card 4 have a similar meaning to the cross of the crux ansata. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. The cross formed by the living limbs of the image signifies that which is the nature of mind, body, spirit complexes and manifestation within your illusion. There is no experience which is not purchased by effort of some kind, no act of service to self or others which does not bear a price to the entity manifesting, commensurate with its purity. All things in manifestation may be seen in one way or another to be offering themselves in order that transformations may take place upon the level appropriate to the action. Yeah, there's a number of things that stand out to me for sure in this archetype. First of which I guess would be the crossed legs. For folks who have not looked at all of the images of the Egyptian tarot or the archetypical mind. Yeah, crosses and individuals with crossed legs are kind of a recurring theme. And here they're saying that the crossed legs really is representation, another way of representing the crux ansata, which I love the way they describe it in the part in blue there. No act of service to self or others which does not bear a price to the entity manifesting commensurate with its purity. I guess this would be another way to look at the idea of sacrifice, the idea of a price that you have to pay. And they're saying that everything that manifests, everything that comes into third density is an act of sacrifice, just sacrificing the infinite to become a finite being, sacrificing being one with everything in order to be separate from everything else through that veil of forgetting. That in itself is a big sacrifice. But they're saying everything that you do here also, whether it's in service to self or in service to others, has a price, and it's commensurate with its purity. Which I guess would say, again, it's a nice reflection of Jesus giving the ultimate sacrifice of his life in order to be of service to others to the highest degree of purity possible. That's at least part of my initial thoughts on this. Did you have any thoughts on this particular archetype, Gabe? How it relates to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I'm not the best, and I never was in terms of analyzing the imagery. I kind of remember a couple of things from the experience of the mind, the tarot card, and the experience itself. But I think you nailed it pretty well, and I agree with that. It's just that the biggest sacrifice, of course, and it's not even a sacrifice, just see, it actually, the way you say it, it lends more to the understanding that sacrifice is something that we do happily and willingly, right? It's wrongly associated with unwanted experience, but rather something that we do with pleasure. So the more we are in line with who we are, then those experiences that allow us to, yes, make the sacrifice of um, I think they mentioned this at some point as to how I don't think they use a statue as a reference, but imagine chiseling something, right? To create a statue, you have to sacrifice a lot of stone to make that image. And at the same time, you're sacrificing all possible images of that block of stone to make exactly what you're making. So is it really a sacrifice? No, it's just the molding of ourselves through experience and through choices. Every chiseling is a choice. And the more we chisel through, the more it takes shape, you see? So yeah, I think what we're doing here together, Jonathan, with reframing sacrifice is something that can be seen even more um, as a desire thing in this path. From the ego's perspective, no, because the ego feels more comfortable the more it is repetitive and predictable. So it retains the same things. That's why it's sometimes associated with pain and sorrow and unwanted feelings and so on. Like that's sacrificing. It's not true, So we see this theme of being humble and charity and all these things. They stem from the same place of it's not a sacrifice, it's a willingness to give away, and that really takes shape. Does
That's a
that?
beautiful way to look at it. And again, I don't think I've really thought about it that way, hadn't really looked at it that way. But I definitely see a lot of truth to that. I mean, I'm thinking maybe first thought that comes to mind is parenthood. I mean, the act of having a child, certainly for the woman, in many cases is considered a very painful experience, but it's something they do willingly and it's something they do with love. And you can certainly say that everything a parent does to help their child in many ways is a sacrifice. They give up a lot of things that they probably would have enjoyed doing rather than like raising kids. But hopefully, yeah, you do it with love and it's something you do enjoy doing and it's a positive thing that I would think that's a very positive sacrifice. Is that in line, do you think, with what you were talking about?
I don't think I could have come with a better example or analogy. That's beautiful. Beautiful way to put it, Jonathan. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I love your visual of the statue. I remember many channeling sessions where they have used that image that we're all like a big chunk of marble, and we're all trying to use the catalyst of our third density experiences to chip away at that marble and let things fall away that are not part of who we are on the deepest level inside. And
Yeah,
that I think is
I
also a
can.
very Buddhist way of looking at it, letting things fall away that are not the truth, that are not of who you are.
Sure. And I want to add two things that came up to mind. One, in terms of prayer, the highest prayer is the one that gives up everything, absolutely everything, right? In the state of prayer, which is the same as meditation on the void or the nothing, silence, so on, so many words that we have for this, that's the ultimate sacrifice. I mean, to see yourself as absolutely nothing, which, it's it begs so many um, clarifications as to what that means. But the highest prayer is probably a little bit more understandable because the highest prayer is the one that sees no separation between you and God. It stops making that distinction because you're making God less than what it is. You're making it without you, like you're a separate thing from God. You see, so is that a sacrifice? My God, that's a willing sacrifice. Of course, I'll do it every day, every single day. And the other thing that comes to mind also, speaking of the chiseling, is to see the experience of the mind in the cycle. What follows? The significator. The significator is a morphing archetype. It's always changing and shaping, and all the transformations are for the significator. So aren't we chiseling over and over again our personality, our being, this manifested being, and so on? So yeah, that's what the experience, the way I related to it.
It's beautiful. Yeah, all makes perfect sense to me, and makes me think of meditation. Meditation would be a great practice, an act of sacrifice, trying to let go of that ego and the self, and sacrificing everything that you might have enjoyed doing instead of meditating in order to find that connection again with the Creator and with Spirit and with oneness, which is again a chiseling away, a letting go of all those things that are not of that nature. Beautiful. I appreciate your bringing up Significator because that was the next archetype that I wanted to look at. Not of the mind, but I believe of the body. Significator of the body. There was a channeling session in February 13th, 2010, where a question was asked specifically about the significator of the body, and this is part of Quo's response. They said, "It is the hope and the intention of the soul before entering into the valley of the shadow that within these shadows, paradoxes, and mysteries of life as experienced upon your planet, there will be that moment of remembrance of why this sacrifice was undertaken. And it is hoped that that moment of remembrance may so illumine the soul within incarnation that the remainder of the incarnation will be one of joy, peace, and bliss. For the mists have been penetrated, the mystery has been solved, and the answer to sacrifice is love. For love moved each of you to embrace this experience, this parenthesis in eternity, as the one known as Joel calls it. And within this tiny shape of a life, this momentary span of your years, once you have awakened to the love within you, you have the opportunity so to shape and intend and offer your life that the riches of that love shall spring forth anew every day, falling like coins from your pockets and turning your world into heaven." Such a beautiful passage. I often get a little bit gushy thinking about it. The parenthesis eternity, the one known as Joel, is Joel Goldsmith, who was a mystical author and spiritual teacher, not to be confused with Billy Joel, who wrote some great songs but did not use this particular phrase. Again, I love the crossed legs imagery, which again harkens back to the Crux Ansata and the crossed legs of the other figure we saw. And yes, this image is referred to as the martyr, so clearly a really powerful visual representation of sacrifice. But again, as we said, have said many times already, it's not just that Jesus is the only one who can sacrifice in any way. Everyone who incarnates, as they refer to in that first line, it's the hope and the intention of every soul who enters into the valley of the shadow that they use to refer to this incarnation, that the remembrance of why the sacrifice was undertaken, which I think speaks well to so many of us. Everyone who identifies as a wanderer would say, yeah, they did this sacrifice to come here, to help to lighten earth energies and to be themselves and to shine the light, channel the love and light of the infinite creator as best we can. It's just that most people forget that and going through the veil of forgetting. So it's such a beautiful thing that there are so many entities or so many phenomena. So, I'm sorry, trying to get used to the new vocab. So many who came here and who are remembering why they came here. And as they said in the last line, everyone has the opportunity to shape and intend everything in their life so that the riches of that love shall spring forth anew every day, falling like coins from your pockets and turning your world into heaven. It's a very beautiful way to look at sacrifice, I think. Any thoughts, reflections on this one, Gabe?
Yeah, so I have there's a perspective on the body. Let's talk about the body. Um, and I agree with you. This is very poetic, very beautifully woven to show how this understanding, how this remembering begins to bring this joy, peace, and love within ourselves, not only as an outward perception, but also as the perception of what do we mean when we say body? Are we still under the spell of believing that the body is made out of matter, of tangible, real things that, dissolve and break apart? Or are they, our bodies, are they just a perception particular to, let's say, third density in this case, that feels very dense, that feels very solid, that feels real, so to speak, right? So this is what creates the fear of pain, the fear of death, the fear of suffering the body. And are we denying pain? We're not. But we know that the body is not the ultimate place where I am. It is just another part of the field of phenomena that exists within awareness. And just like my thoughts come and go, the body comes and goes. And I don't mean death and reincarnation, but actually the body is simply a vibration. Everything else is a vibration. So all I see is vibration. And when I say I mean awareness, not me as an entity, as the collection of experiences that I call, Gabriel, as an experiential continuum. No, I'm talking about awareness. So this remembering, actually, again, it's another willing sacrifice that we do to stop seeing the body as a sort of, vehicle in which I am in, but rather, the vehicle with which or through which I perceive reality. So I'm not destined to be, in the body or the pain in the body. So many things change. So many things change in just daily perception of life when this disassociation with the body happens. And I think this is what the whole cycle of the body in in the archetypical mind, that's what the transformation is about. It's about changing the perspective of, once again, we see what? Separation and unity. And this separation begins obviously from the perspective that I am the body. I depend on the body. So a simple remembering, an investigation into our true identity begins to erode this false idea that I am in the body. And so many of the associations that bring suffering, psychological suffering from the body starts to go away. That's how I see it.
Indeed. Yeah, beautifully said. All makes perfect sense to me. And I think that's actually a great transition to the fourth and last archetype that I wanted to look at today. Transformation of the spirit. Uh, on March 31st, 1996, Quo said, "Thus, the one known as Jesus wished to offer itself as one who provided a pattern or model of beingness that delineated the nature of sacrifice and transformation, that there was indeed no death which would end the experience of consciousness in this illusion, that there was the possibility of using the illusion about one as a means by which one could give and receive love from all other entities according to the desire or choice made within one's own being, no matter the circumstances without the self. Thus, the one known as Jesus was able to offer its own life as an example of the kind of transformation possible for each entity within this illusion. Thus, this entity used the illusion for a greater purpose than becoming any kind of king or power within the illusion. This entity offered a means through the illusion and beyond the illusion as it explored and shared the love of the one creator in a pure and undistorted fashion." The person who was asking this question really wasn't referring to this particular archetype, but I believe this particular passage just seems to go really well with this transformation of the spirit archetype, which bears really clear visual allusions to this idea of resurrection, of rising from the dead, or realizing, as you were saying, Gabe, a minute ago, that yeah, we've just come to assume that our body, our physical body, is all there is. And here, this entity known as Jesus or Yehoshua, I believe that's part of what they're doing as a way shower, was showing, no, that's not all. There is much, much more to this than you think. And that death of the body is not death of the spirit, and your consciousness lives on and grows. A beautiful message delivered 2,000 years ago that people today still don't really fully understand, still working on it to this day. Any thoughts on this particular passage or this archetype, Gabe?
Yeah, I think it solidifies pretty well what we have been talking about in terms of what the great work, as Ra calls it, is, which is this continuous transformation of perception. Because it's not like we are, becoming etheric beings. Like every day we are less molecules and more light. That's not what's happening. I mean, it's just an inner transformation that is happening for life as we see it every day to be more in line with the truth. The truth, I mean, everything that we talk about, wisdom, love, higher intelligence, and all these things are just ways to be more in line with truth. And the truth is who you are. So this one transformation, which is, the nature of sacrificing that which is not true, right? For it to take place, that's what needs to reoccur over and over again in our lives. That's why Catalyst keeps presenting itself. I suppose that, this is, and it makes sense, of course, it's not just a supposition, but it makes sense that when we're so enthralled with the perception of separation, it feels very scary, to let go of those things that we're so used to and that keep us in a comfortable position, in a place. So yeah, I think at certain point there's a switch that happens in us in which we're willing to um, suffer because we know that what's suffering is that which is no longer needed. In other words, the psychological suffering that we go through at some point it becomes a, a desirable thing. We want to go through this suffering because once again, what's suffering is something that is not us. I hope that makes sense because I know that our language is so honed into this preservation of no suffering. We shouldn't suffer, right? But that's not really what, and even in Buddhism, and I know we're going to switch to that, and even in Buddhism, it's not about avoiding suffering. You don't want to avoid suffering. It's just that suffering is such a minuscule thing, or it becomes such a minuscule thing that is welcome. You see, and that keeps expanding our capacity to be able to process experience. So we become greater than what we think we were at the beginning. And
Indeed.
that's I
Yeah.
think that's, just to finish this part, I think that's what Jesus truly represents in this passage, as um, you know, to us, like for example, they use the idea of he gave up kingdom and all of this because he could have become, this is a recurring thing. He could have become something that we think it's greater, oh yeah, I own so much stuff. But to him, that wasn't even an option. That's like, becoming, I don't know, a mass murderer. Like, are you giving that up? Oh, what a sacrifice. No, thank you. I'm willingly not being a mass murderer. So to him, it was just like the same thing. It's just that to our eyes, it just seems like, wow, he gave up kingdom. Like, no, you didn't care. That's no, thank you.
Well, because he knew his kingdom was not of this world, and that everything here was just an illusion, and
Yeah.
it would be like being the king of an imaginary country or something like that.
That's well said.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying about suffering because, yes, for sure. I mean, we all kind of take it as a given that we don't really enjoy suffering and that is really painful. And yet, I believe most people who have learned about the archetypical mind, I think, no, there is one particular archetype, and I'm not remembering which one it was, but the teaching that Ra shared was that those catalysts which appear to us to be negative are the ones that usually help us polarize more towards service to others, as in like suffering and unpleasant experiences. Whereas the catalysts that we interpret as being positive really tend to polarize us more towards service to self because it's like, oh, life is good. This is a great experience. I don't need to do anything to help others, just enjoy it.
Mhm.
But you know what? It occurred to me as you were speaking. Obviously, when I look at this image and think about resurrection and think about how Jesus was a way shower showing that death is not the end and that what you consider to be suffering of the physical body is just an illusion, I was reminded of all those Buddhist monks who have lit themselves on fire for whatever reasons they did in protest or whatever, but also to show that is how much they have transcended the physical illusion to show that they can do that. And from what I've seen of videos or photos, they're just sitting there and letting their body burn. They're not like running around screaming or anything like that. It's amazing. Are you familiar with those Buddhist monks? Are you familiar with that? And do you know anything about why they may have chosen to do that? Is it
I'm
different?
amazed by you mentioning it because the moment we started talking about Jesus and the sacrifice of his body and why it is so impactful for us that he was willing to sacrifice his body, those thoughts came to me. So, yep, the immolation of Buddhist monks, it's a very well-known thing, and it shows. It really shows, how there is a detachment of the body. Um, yeah, I think I'm actually very amazed that you mentioned it because I had it in the back of my mind when we started talking about Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I must have been picking up on it. But again, yeah, another beautiful form of sacrifice right
Mhm.
here in modern times. Why don't we go ahead and move on? Let's talk about that entity known as Buddha. I have a few passages that I would love to hear your thoughts on, Gabe. Starting with this one, on October 25th, 2008. Quo is recorded as saying, "The all self of the Buddha was a long time in coming, my brother. There was a walk of humanhood and all the exploration that that called for before the one known as Gautama came to the awareness of his own divinity. This entity experienced his divinity by becoming a ferryman and ferrying people back and forth. It is typical of mythical stories that the central figure is painted as having the ability to remain in the queen's chamber position or to remain in the position of priest." Queen's chamber, of course, was one of the chambers in the Egyptian pyramids, and specifically the chamber where process known as initiation was said to have happened. And I did have a passage that I might not have shared with you before, Gabe. I think I just added this like at the last minute today. But in session 57, question 24, Ra said, "The initiation of the Queen's Chamber has to do with the abandoning of self to such desire to know the Creator in full, that the purified in-streaming light is drawn in balanced fashion through all energy centers, meeting in indigo and opening the gateway to intelligent infinity. Thus the entity experiences true life, or as your people call it, resurrection." Kind of a nice callback to what we were just talking about a minute ago, but in a different sense. Any thoughts on this passage or this part? Okay.
Oh, I have so many. And time's not going to be enough for me to even get to a tenth because that is my job. I'm a ferryman myself of this path. This is precisely what my dedication, my devotion started to flower through the years of me dedicating myself to this teaching, this understanding. So, yeah, it rings true at so many levels. But I guess the first thing that I'll like to share and just add into our conversation is that first, the teaching of the Buddha was of straight going into your true nature. Who are you? Right? He was a scientist to me rather than somebody who was spiritual. He was a true scientist, which combined both things, physical and metaphysical, got rid of both of them and stayed with what is. So that's what the purpose of the Queen's Chamber in initiation, and if we can read, and we will read it again, I'm sure, how there are so many things. We'll go back to that. But first here, that's what ferrying people is in this paragraph, back and forth. You're going from the idea of who you are to the note to the understanding of who you are, right? That's it. That's all he cared to talk about. He didn't care about anything else. Is the universe infinite? He doesn't care. He won't answer that. Am I a body? He wouldn't answer that. Uh, any questions that had to be, metaphysical or other gods, he wouldn't answer that. He only cared about you. What do you think you are? So that's the job of the ferryman. And there are so many analogies that are played and examples on this, but that's basically it,
Do you
showing
think that
people
has
who
to
they
do
are.
with abandoning of self then, in terms of showing you who you really are? Is that
You have
part
you
of
have
the
to.
initiation process?
You have to. I mean, and we'll talk about the pyramid and its effects the way I see it as well. But yeah, I mean, first of all, if you go to the Buddha, right? If you are approaching the mystical teaching, the understanding of oneness, divinity, whatever you want to call it, if you're approaching that, it's because you're confused. I mean, you're implicitly saying, help me out because I don't know what's going on. And you're not asking, to fix your car or to, where to get the most beautiful flowers. You're asking, a deep question about yourself. So that means that you're confused. And obviously, to know yourself, you need to let go of the thing that you think you are. So the most direct way to do this is to go straight into that question of What do you mean when you say I? What are you talking about? So you come to me asking the question, who am I? What can I do, to know myself? Well, what do you mean when you say I? What's your confusion? I need to know, what is it that you refer to as I? So you see, on a metaphysical level, we can see here in the pyramid why it was designed this way. Because as Ra says, yes, the abandoning of the self, um, what do they say? Let me read it. The initiation of the Queen's Chamber has to do with the abandoning of self to such desire to know the Creator in full that the purified in streaming light is drawn, etc. We'll get to that part. But yeah, first you need to have a desire to abandon yourself, to let go of everything. And that's what we do in this teaching. It doesn't mean that you have to abandon your house and your family and all. No, it's an inner process. You can continue to be functional. It's just that you're going to begin to dig in to the most true and honest question you can ask in reality, which is, who are you? And then the implications of finding that, right? So you do have to abandon yourself in that way. But here in the pyramid, just like in other methodologies, there is a very strong and intense, let's call it a forced experience on the conscious mind, right? The forced experience is what they express here as the light streaming, right? In a balanced fashion, moving through all the energy centers, right? Meeting in indigo. Why indigo? Because that is the gateway to intelligent infinity, or rather, unity. In other words, the conscious mind would be impaired for a period of time. I'm not sure how long they did it there. For a period of time, the conscious mind was fully impaired from seeing itself through the perception of separation. And so that resulted in a pure view and direct association of themselves with oneness, with awareness. We try to do this a lot with plant medicine right now, and it's all over the place. People have all kinds of experiences because it's never, it's throwing a dice. We don't know which face is going to land. And yet sometimes, yes, you get the number that you needed and you see it, and then comes integration. That's why the King's Chamber was on top. Healing. We need healing after that. So Queen's Chamber, initiation. King's Chamber, integration, healing. That's what you need. You see? So because the conscious mind will come back online and say, whoa, but how do I integrate this? I saw that I was this oneness, whatever it is. Speaking of psychedelics, there is the Bufo alvarius, the 5-MeO, DMT, which is the most intense experience that people have. People often report this because whatever happens in the brain, it just completely shuts the possibility of associating yourself with a separate being. So, awareness is just shining purely. So people come back. Some people come back completely wrecked and incapable of integrating this experience. So we're missing a lot, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I just want to give different angles as to what this means. You need to abandon yourself, and I think the way we should do it is in a gentle way. We don't need these things anymore. As Ross said, the pyramid is past. We can do this now, and the mechanics or the dynamics of what this really is that. So what does the Buddha represent? A very gentle way of going through this investigation of, we don't need to get metaphysical here, but we can if we want to, aligning yourself. Ra says, it doesn't matter how bright your energy centers are, balance is the key. Right. And that's what we're looking for.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate your explaining all of that. I think this is something our viewers will definitely appreciate. Having a better understanding of, since so much of this I think is so difficult to understand. For the record, for our viewers who are not aware of this, the indigo that they're referring to at the end of the first paragraph refers to your indigo energy center, also known as the third eye chakra in Hindu tradition. So energy centers is the terms that our friends in the Confederation used to refer to what Hindus might refer to as chakras. They're not the same thing. There are more than a few notable differences, but there's quite a bit of overlap here. So, yeah, ironic that it would be in the third eye chakra that you lose your sense of I and your sense of ego, I suppose. But yeah, no, I appreciate everything that you said, and I can see for sure how coming back from that experience of intense oneness through plant medicines like DMT can be a very difficult thing to integrate if you haven't like had any similar experiences to build on or to relate to. Otherwise, did you have any other thoughts to share on this passage? I appreciated your reflections on the ferryman. That is something that definitely struck me that I wasn't totally sure if I was understanding correctly. But I can certainly
Yeah.
see your role in what you do as helping people go back and forth to that place of
Yeah.
oneness.
No, and yeah, thank you for asking because I do have a couple of more things, especially when they say that the ability to remain in the queen's chamber position or in the position of the priest. You see, instead of the intensity, which, at least in the pyramid, we can see that it was a set thing because of the in-streaming of prana, right? That would produce that. The job or the service of somebody who is a ferryman here is to do this with people, you see, and that's the teacher that shows the way to simply know who you are. All this work of opening there, your third eye, as they say, right? Of moving into indigo ray, it's all about seeing yourself clearly as you are. There's no mistake. If I guide you through the investigation of who you are, you should be able to replicate this over and over again and have no confusion as to who you are. That is the integration that is needed, moving forward. And that integration is the resurrection that they talk about in the other paragraph. Well, Rob talks about that. That would be, the entity experiences true life or resurrection. So, weren't we experiencing true life before? No, it was life shaded or uh, tinted with the perception of separation, the wrong perception of me being a limited being. So yeah, that's that these paragraphs were so well selected, Jonathan. I love it.
Oh, I appreciate your saying that for sure. I know I had my own perspectives at looking this and what they meant, but you said so many things today already that never occurred to me, never really thought of that add, I think, a lot more depth and a lot more breadth to what is found here. We have talked a fair bit about detachment already, and I believe I had another passage on that subject. Was there anything else you wanted to share on this other passage before we do that?
I think we're good.
That's
I'm
good.
good.
Thank you so much. This was a passage from, this is about detachment, and this is from a passage on January 2nd, 1983. This is from the entity known as Latwii. Remember, the entity known as Quo is made up of what we refer to as three social memory complexes, or planetary consciousnesses, and Latwii is one of those three at fifth density, I believe. So the question that somebody named Kay asked was, Buddha talked about detachment as being a goal to be desired. Would you say something about the meaning of detachment and how it applies to us? Latwii says, each of you, as we have said, moves within an illusion. The veil of forgetting is drawn so that it is not possible for a clear perception of the nature of your unity with all things to be known to you. Therefore, you learn through being attached, shall we say. You learn by desiring, by sowing the seeds of wishes. Do you then draw unto yourself those events to fulfill the wishes? By observing your response to such events, your emotions may be discovered to be positive or negative, and by achieving the balance within the self of each emotional response, the entity becomes what is called balanced, or regularized according to the expression of each energy center or chakra. This then allows the entity to experience what various of your religious cultures have called the non-attached state of being. We might refer to this more clearly as a finely tuned type of compassion, so that whatever catalyst the entity encounters, the entity is aware that it is seeing the Creator experiencing itself, and the entity's response is love, compassion, and understanding. This is the balance which has been spoken of by the description of detachment. Fascinating passage here. And I know that detachment has been a big part of many Buddhist traditions and my understanding of it. And here, I think they're giving a different perspective on it than I think I was used to. I was thinking of detachment being more like, I think, what we've talked about in terms of letting go of the ego in order to be one with all again. And here they really seem to be talking more about how we balance catalysts that can be interpreted as being positive or negative, pleasant or unpleasant, but learning how to balance the response to all of those things with love, compassion, and understanding is a beautiful thing. But I think there's kind of a nice overlap with Christianity as well. Any thoughts on this passage, Gabe?
Yeah, I would actually say, Jonathan, that you were quite right, actually, when you thought about detachment that way, because only the ego, and if we can zoom in a little bit more on what the ego is, you'll be able to understand that what you were thinking is quite right. Letting go of the ego. It's a very surface way of saying the same thing. Why? Because what we call the ego is a false association of ourselves with the I thought, right? An I thought is almost inevitable that will arise because I am, right? But the I thought, when attached to something, becomes the ego, right? It becomes a sort of self-image that we try to preserve and we try to hold on to, or the ego tries to hold on to. But the truth of it is just that there is a tendency on that attachment, and the tendency is not knowing your emotions, not understanding your emotions, where they stem from. And so we believe that we need to continue to have these emotions and experiences to be ourselves. So whichever way you look at it, letting go of the ego, whatever that may mean to somebody, it's letting go of all the detachments, because letting go of detachments is debilitating the ego. Letting go of the ego is debilitating the detachments. In I'm not even gonna call it spirituality or Buddhism, but in a reasonable, logical mind, detachment is the only option. In a reasonable, logical mind, detachment is the only option, because a reasonable mind wants to know the truth, and the truth of who we are is it's something that, like we say in Zen, we cannot nail a nail in the sky, right? So what are you attaching to? And who is this one that is attaching to? You see, the nature of who we are is completely and absolutely detached from everything. So it's, once again, a change of perception. And it is for sure the weakening of this tendency, I call it. It's a weakening of a tendency that we have towards certain experiences and images of ourselves. So how does this happen? Once again, I know I sound repetitive, but it really is the only practice. Know who you are at every moment. That's how you go into deeper healing. As we said, first there is initiation, right? That's what we talk about in the Queen's Chamber. That initiation is unequivocally to know yourself beyond the perception of separation, which happens in even in the lower or the heart and throat chakra, right? In all of this, there is the idea of separation. There is an entity there. Beyond this, there is not. There is only pure awareness, you. And in pure awareness, you are. So, wow, what a great realization. I am in pure awareness. So I must be that because everything else appears there. Even my chakras, my ideas, Buddha, Jesus, all these concepts, everything, every single thought appears in this awareness. So the moment we begin to re-identify, to remember who we are, then we can see the playfulness of the mind trying to attach to things, to experiences, to want to revisit things, always with the I thought. So it's once again referring us back and back to, I think they say it here, we might refer to this more clearly as a finely tuned type of compassion, so that whatever catalyst the entity encounters, the entity is aware that it is seeing the creator experiencing itself. All you see is yourself. Once you see that you're the creator, everything else must be the creator. What's the only response? Love, compassion, and understanding. See, there's always these two. That's the compassion and understanding. And that's the balance that is spoken about by detachment, period. Detachment is just letting everything be as it is because you know that there's nothing to attach to.
Yeah, and I think that is perhaps one of the most challenging things for so many people, at least myself included, in navigating the third density consensus reality is remembering that every entity you see in person or on a screen is in fact the creator. Everyone is creator talking to itself and interacting with itself. We're all energy fields interacting with energy fields. We're all thoughts dancing in a ballroom with no material interacting with other thought forms. It's a really beautiful, elevated way to look at life. It's why a lot of people take plant medicines, I think, so they can feel like that more often. But yeah, to be able to do that on your own without any chemical helpers, yeah, I think that's something that we can all strive for, and to find that love in every moment and realizing that everyone that you see is a creator. Appreciate that.
Can I throw a suggestion for everybody listening?
Please.
Especially with what you're saying, it's not it's not difficult. We don't need anything. All that is needed, actually, this is my suggestion. Don't let the mind do it. The mind's going to get it wrong. The mind's going to do it limited. So this is the effortless path. Stop getting the mind involved. Don't let the mind want to remember that everybody is the creator. Remember or keep in mind, it's a helpful mechanism for sure, but it's not needed. Eventually, it needs to drop off. Just like mantra meditation or any meditation that is focused on any particular object, whether that be mental or physical, it needs to go away eventually if we are to experience this oneness. Let's say it that way. And in oneness, there is love and understanding. I mean, all love and understanding stems as a quality of oneness or pure awareness. So don't let the mind get in the way of trying to do this. It'll never do it. It'll always postpone it. It'll always see it as an evolutionary thing. In the future, I might get there. Remove the mind, which is not a difficult thing to do. Just know that the mind is just another thing that is experienced in the field of phenomena. And this whole thing is awareness. Or in simpler terms, be present.
Well said. Yeah, much appreciated. And that, I would say, is a great transition into our next passage. Are you ready to look at another passage? Did you have anything else you wanted to share on this one?
Good. Let's keep reading.
Thank you. Speaking of mantras, the jewel is in the lotus is a common mantra expressed in Tibetan Buddhism as Om Mani Padme Hum. And on March 3rd, 1979, our good friend Latwii had some interesting words to share about that. This, like probably every passage I've shared with you, has been edited for brevity. Here, Latwii said, imagine the jewel inside the many petals of the lotus. How tightly are the petals closed, my friends, about the jewel of love within you? How much do you have to peel away from your life before you come to the singular and single essence of truth that is all about you? Remove the petals from the lettuce. Lettuce. Remove the petals from the lotus, charming as they may be, and as delightful as they may smell. Find the holy ground. Find the jewel, that which is love. Upon this ground you can stand without fear of falling, losing your footing, or being cast away from your place, for this is your birthright. Love is what you are. What you think you are, if you think you are not love, is an illusion, a mass of distorted detail that can be slowly weeded or quickly weeded from your life, as you would weed from a garden those things which are not pleasant or helpful by the process of meditation. Any thoughts on this? Do you interpret Latui's, do you agree with Latui's interpretation of this mantra about the jewel in the lotus?
Yeah, I actually known the personality that Latwii exudes in their channelings. I'm actually surprised to see so much poetry. Um, they tend to be very square with their words. So here, they were excited to talk about this. So, um, okay, so you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say they are coming from fifth density, which is the density of wisdom, which seems
Yeah,
to be very much part of this. And they also have a
yeah,
they are notorious for their cosmic sense of humor, which has come out in various places too. But I know what you mean.
yeah.
The poetry of this passage, I was
Oh,
definitely is captured.
yeah. Yeah, so I can begin with um, the whole theme or essence that I see in this is once again, they ended with the process of meditation, right? And that is the removing of everything. This is something that I emphasize in my teaching as you have to let go. Initially, we're very attracted to this path because we want to let go of all the things that um, all the mental associations that we have, the things that makes us suffer, right? We want to get rid of the ego. We want to get rid of our traumas and so on. And it's a good incentive. However, in the process of meditation, there is a possibility which um, to each, their own, and it's their choice. But something will start to come up as uh, beautiful experiences or experiences that are charming, like they say, delightful. These experiences, these thoughts, these images, they're going to come up. Uh, it's almost inevitable that they will come up. Even those we need to get rid of. You see, maybe the word is not get rid of. I think it's a little too harsh, but rather to not get distracted with and allow them to also pass or actually experience their passing. I think I'm refining as I'm going, but to experience their ephemeral quality, right? And know that you are not that. To allow all those things to go, to, yeah, take all the petals out. And what is it that remains when either negative thoughts or positive thoughts are not gone, but not distracting? What is it that remains? That's the jewel. That's what they call love. Love is not of the mind. The mind uses love for sure as a means to relate in separation, which is the intense experiences that we have with people and situations and so on. But true unconditional love is that of space. Space has no desire to have a square, a triangle, a rectangle, a sphere. It doesn't care for anything. It allows everything. It doesn't interfere. It doesn't choose. It just allows everything. And sure enough, ourselves, who we are, is permissive of everything. And this actually, I'll throw in this one too, because it's a common one. This actually responds to the typical question of if God exists and is all loving, why does it allow suffering? Because suffering is nothing to space. It's just another experience. God never actually suffers. The only one that suffers is the confused self as a separate being. So again, this all makes obviously more sense the more we understand that we are that love. We understand that we are that space, that awareness, that one being. And so, yeah, if you think that you are not that love, then that it's an illusion. That's all you are. In other words, and this is maybe another one, speaking of Buddhism, I am the void. So people say, oh no, I'm scared of that. I don't want to be the void. That seems like I'm nothing. But it is true. That void is love, is devoid of biases, of choices, of selectivity. And that's what you are. Anything else is an illusion. Even if you think that you're a saint, a spiritual being, or whatever it is, that's an illusion. Ra is an illusion. Everybody is an illusion because there are limitations as to what they truly are. However, they are expressions, and those expressions are pure love too. So that's the little playful thing that we have in creation.
Indeed.
But yeah,
Yeah, and I appreciate your touching on that question about if God is good, then why does God allow so much pain and suffering in the world? I think that's a question that comes up for everybody who thinks about this for more than a few minutes, and something that a lot of people have difficulty with. But that is one of those things that I appreciate a lot about the law of one. It's helped me to look at it through a different lens that helps me see that, well, when somebody does something terrible to somebody else, whether it's murder or rape or anything else like that, it's creator doing it to itself. If all is one, as we said, and we're all just creator in different masks, then it's creator doing it to itself. And why would creator do that? Because God is infinite intelligence, intelligent infinity, and always wants to learn more about all the different possibilities of experience, including the very light, including the very dark, which is why the service to self path is considered an equally valid path as service to others. As difficult as it may be for service to others folks to accept, that is certainly the case. But as they said again at the very beginning, all is one, and that one thing is love. Everything that you see, no matter how terrible or heinous or violent it may be, is still love, just in a very, very distorted form. But it still goes back to the one original thought of love. And that, I think, is the meaning, the jewel in the lotus. It's finding the love in every moment. It's finding creator at the heart of yourself, as well as every other entity you might encounter. Did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share on this passage before we kind of start winding things down, Gabe?
I'm good. Thank you, Jonathan.
You bet. Much appreciated. I know these podcasts tend to run pretty long, and I did want to encourage folks. You can always put these in your watch later list, and nobody says you have to watch this all in one sitting. And that's why we always break the videos into chapters so that you can kind of skip around. You don't have to watch the whole thing. You can see what's there and skip to the parts that are of interest to you. So let's take a look at a few passages where our friends in the Confederation have talked about both Jesus and Buddha as valuable parts of the law of one philosophy together. On April 2nd, 2011, Kuo said, both entities, Jesus and Siddhartha, offer tremendous resources to those who are seeking the truth. They have different areas of appeal, but that which they hold in common is powerful. To them both, the seeking of the Creator, service to the Creator, time spent in the company of the Creator are all in all. To both, there is no priority greater than spiritual seeking. Both of them lived lives that indicated this preference, this concern, and this devotion. There are two different styles of seeking when gazing at these two powerful and poignant beings. To one, knowing that his kingdom was not of this world, he nevertheless entered into the world with all of his heart and soul, and nothing in his heart but love for all he saw. As he entered in, so his physical body was destroyed by that which he took upon himself. the suffering of the world. All suffering was taken into the self and accepted. That it destroyed his physical body was not that which was important to the one known as Jesus the Christ, but rather that he do his Father's bidding. Not my will, but thine, were his words. The Buddha saw the same world and knew that he was not of it or part of it. Consequently, his path did not move into the open heart and take all of the suffering of the world into the self. Rather, he allowed the things of the world to fall away as they seemed to want to fall away in his view. Over the period of a lifetime, he was able to investigate each path in the world and conclude that that was not his path. The principle of neti neti, not this and not that, comes into play here. Thusly, as the Buddha allowed all to fall away except the seeking for the one creator, the entity no longer was concerned with the suffering of the world except to pray that all suffering might cease. There was not the attempt to take on the suffering of the world. Rather, the attempt was to allow the suffering of the one known as the Buddha to fall away, and as the suffering fell away from the Buddha, so it would fall away from the world. The teachings of the one known as Jesus appeal to those who enjoy the feeling of an open heart, a heart open to love. The teachings of the one known as Siddhartha appeal to those who seek wisdom. Yet the compassionate follower of the Christ and the compassionate follower of the Buddha meet in the middle, where love and wisdom are balanced. Consequently, either path is sound and useful. And we might suggest to those who are Buddhist or Hindu and have followed the path of the Buddha for their lifetime, that they investigate what it is to follow the teachings of the one known as Jesus. It is equally useful for those who have followed the teachings of Jesus over the period of their lifetime to investigate and enter into the teachings of the one known as Siddhartha. So beautiful. I really just love how many times our friends in the Confederation have said that pretty much everyone who's incarnated on the planet at this time came here to learn how to balance energies of love and wisdom. And they show how Jesus really seems to embody perhaps that way of the open heart of unconditional love for all. And the entity known as Jesus seems to embody really well the fifth density path of wisdom. And finding a way to balance those two things, I think, is really important for everybody. Do you have any thoughts on anything here, Gabe?
Yeah, it's beautiful to describe the we can call it the two main paths of this mystical teaching, which is the path of devotion and the path of knowledge, of understanding. And once again, yeah, Jesus represents that love, that compassion, that devotion to the world. And Buddha represents the path of knowledge, or the path of knowledge and understanding, which is, yes, I love the part where they say that the Buddha, um, he'd rather, allow the suffering to go through and then fall away. And that will in turn stop the suffering from everybody else. Now, here's the thing, which reminds me of one of the sorrows that a lot of particularly wanderers, as we know them in this model of the law of one, go through, which is the desire to end the suffering for everybody else. This promotes a couple of things. One is the path of devotion, which is, what are you going to do? How are you going to help to end the suffering? But also, is it real? Is their suffering real? Is your suffering real? So when you see that your suffering is not real, then you're able to see that people's suffering is not real. I know this gets controversial. I know it's a sensitive topic because it is true that we feel pain. It is true that and I'm talking even psychological pain. But this is not a, yeah, it is not a denial of people's suffering. It's rather an understanding that it's not ultimately real. And so you need to first that see within yourself. If there is still suffering in you, you're going to project it outwards and you're going to see suffering in others. Your capacity to help will be limited to that because you're still going to validate their suffering and say, I know that you're suffering. I know that there is, you know, it's almost like, especially in the direct path, which is the method that I use, we kind of make like the weakest, most necessary basic concession to the ego, but we try to bypass it completely. We don't care to nourish the ego, to cultivate, a divine ego. It's all about going straight into who you are. And the same thing happens here. So a good analogy for this is, how people play games and they get really involved in the game, and there is a sort of, suffering in the game. So when you're in the game and you're really invested, then you feel like it's real. I'm going to lose, we're going to lose. And fans all over the world of games also experience this. It's almost like a loss, my God, we're going to lose. And they feel this pain and suffering, right? So somebody outside of this says, fine, you're going through that. That's your experience. But I just want to remind you that it's ultimately not real. You're not losing anything. It's just a game. And you're investing yourself in a playfulness between two teams, duality, and the results of it. Who's going to win? Sometimes one team wins, then the other. There's always going to be a winner and a loser in duality. So step out of that, realize that it's just a game, and that once the game is over, it's dissipated. So that's I could probably see Jesus, going into the game and absorbing all of that suffering, right? Because people are suffering there, and he wants to just alleviate it for everybody, right? That was his attitude, right? Whereas the Buddha was just standing outside of the karmic game, if you will, and saying, okay, I'm not playing your game. I'm here to remind you that it is a game and that you willingly decide to go there. If you don't understand this, then here's my teaching. Here's how I show you to get out of the game or to come out of the wheel of reincarnation, the karmic wheel, the wheel of becoming, and so on. So
Yeah, that's
that's how I see all
also
of this.
Yeah, and it's also a great reminder of what we have been told many times by our friends in the Confederation, which is don't worry about changing other people. Don't worry about saving the world. Really, the best way to do either of those things is to do the inner work and to do the healing inside. And I like this little reference here to letting the things of the world fall away as they seem to want to fall away in his view. And that certainly reminds me of what I've heard many times about meditation, which is it's not about not having any thoughts. It's not about letting your mind be empty. You just let the thoughts rise and let the thoughts fall and let them pass without holding on to them. And I can totally see how if one can learn how to do that and not get carried away with all the pain and suffering in the world, that actually does help the world, that does actually lighten earth energies. And I think that's a beautiful thing to remember. I think we're coming up on the 2 hour mark if we haven't passed it already. I did have one more passage that I wanted to read through together that I think will kind of wrap things up nicely. And I do have a pop quiz for you today, my friend. Are you okay to move on to that last passage?
I am. Let's do this.
All right. This was from February 11th, 2001. And I believe this was Quo, who said, as we said, the great virtue of any outer religion is that it offers a place to be within the illusion. When one is within a path that is known, one may feel that one is not alone, that one belongs, that one is part of something that is beautiful and continuing and holy. When no sparks come to a seeker from looking at the various religions, then it is that the seeker must to create her own path. And this is a challenge. Certainly, it is one that each is capable of rising to and meeting, but it does throw one upon one's own resources in a way that an outer path of religion does not. We sympathize with each who seeks, for we, like those within your circle, do not necessarily feel that one path has all the answers, but rather that each path offers advantages. We would simply suggest to each that the seeking for the right path be done in the atmosphere of the trust of self and of the self's powers of discrimination and choice, for the seeker will know what is truly for him. And we may say that no matter what the path chosen, the creation speaks equally to all. Each day, each hour, and each moment offer sight to the eye and sound to the ear for one who is looking and to one who is listening for the truth. We would encourage each, no matter what the path followed, to focus upon those aspects of the faith that unify and harmonize, that bring the self to a deeper feeling of the immediacy and the essence of the self. For beyond all perceived religions lies the self within that is each of you, and that self is the essence of holiness. That self is the spark of the infinite creator. And those thoughts that you think are but distortions of the one great original thought that is love. No matter where you seek, you dwell in the precincts of love. Once again, it goes back to that opening statement about the law of one, that all is one and that one thing is love. This is all, everything we've talked about today seems to be just like different variations of that one statement. And I love the closing thoughts here that if you do decide to follow a path of a established religion, be it Christianity or Buddhism or Islam or Judaism or Zoroastrianism or any other established religion, there are great advantages to each, and no one is better than the others, and each gives you the advantage of having perhaps a community of similar seekers to hang out with. But again, for those who choose not to follow any established path, the Creator can be found in every one of those paths, in every moment, every present moment. Love can be found. No matter where you seek, you dwell in the precincts of love. Such a beautiful closing thought, I think. Any thoughts on this passage or anything else here, Gabe?
No, actually, just to say thank you for putting this as a final passage because it, yeah, it brings it beautifully. I don't know if how aware you were when you put it in, but to me, it just finishes beautifully this conversation that we've had. And I'll just build upon what you said on, the religion, mystical path, because religions are simply an outer teaching. They're an exoteric teaching that is meant to um, incentivize, to welcome people who are, in need to feel, like they said, part of a community, part of something that is beautiful, a communion. And that to me is it's beautiful that we have this because then there is, of course, for most of us, I would say, who um, we couldn't be satisfied with religion. We knew there was something bigger, more beautiful. And so we got into the mystical teachings. And even the mystical teachings, they, even though they're closer, more related to each other as to what they mean, they're still pointing to something that is so intimate that cannot be described. That's what brings us to direct experience. And the staying in the now, the present moment, opening the gates to the present moment, all of this. So no matter where people are, if they are in religion and they're, you know, in embellished by these traditions and so on, or if they are, in the deepest portions of their mystical path, everybody's looking in the same direction. Everybody's going in the same direction, regardless. That's why, in a way, nobody is astray. To try to save the world is a futile attempt because the world was created to be outside of it, to be in it, even if you're not of it. That's the whole thing. You're always, and even if as confused as somebody can be in this path, or not even this path, they're still looking in this direction. All of them, everybody. So, like you said, and I'm grateful that you mentioned it. Remember that we're not here to change the world. We're not here to save the world. Nobody's here to save anything. We're here to just share our being. And how much you know your being, that's the biggest service that you can provide. So, once again, who are you on a fundamental level? And then who are you as an action, an activity? And yeah, this is to me what this exemplifies, the capacity that we have to just, like you said, just recognize this pure love. I can't remember where they said it, but they reference back and back again to, you know, love, love being the only quality that our being has. So yeah, everything just moves in this direction.
Indeed. Yeah, and that is probably one of the hardest things to remember in these days of late third density Earth. Our friends in the Confederation have said that the Earth is already out of third density and that planet Earth is already vibrating fully in fourth density. It's just humanity that seems to be lagging behind. That is why I think, in so many ways, we are seeing so much distress and polarization and chaos and disorder in our social and political spheres. Perhaps because people haven't realized that yet. And if you want to change the world, like I said, the best way is to change yourself and to be more loving and more compassionate and to let all those things that are not greater fall away. And that is going to bring us to our final segment, I would say. Where do we go from here? This is the part of the episode where we try to sum up everything that we talked about in the last 2 hours and a few perhaps good takeaway lessons. So I think we've already spoken about all of these things to some extent already. But if I had to come up with a few good takeaway lessons, I would say first, if you remember that Jesus is love and Buddha is wisdom, perhaps the best personifications, best ways to embody those principles, that'd be great. And that also means that unconditional love is the key to fourth density, and wisdom is the key to fifth, and that Jesus, in many ways, did incarnate on this planet and apparently other planets to be a way shower, to show the way of early third density populations or late to the where to go in fourth density, and that is through unconditional love. And beyond that, after that, wisdom is the key to fifth density, how to apply that love and to balance it. Which reminds us again that we're all here to balance energies of love and wisdom in our own unique way, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for anyone else, and what works for everyone else doesn't necessarily work for you. But that is the challenge and the joy of this incarnation we came here for. Gabe, did you have any takeaways you wanted to add of your own, or any last thoughts before we wrap things up and have a little pop quiz?
Now I'm just appreciating what you did here. This is it's perfect. It's beautiful. Yep. This is it.
Really appreciate her being here. Can't think of anyone else I would rather have this conversation with and this discussion with. So thank you so much for all the teach learnings that you've shared with me and with our viewers here, and look forward to doing this again sometime. Otherwise, it is time for our pop quiz. As you may or may not know, pop quiz was a phrase that Carla used a lot to refer to the catalyst that we get in our daily rounds to see if we have really learned the things that we came here to learn. It is also something we just like to do at the end of our podcast, just to end on a lighter note and add a little fun and levity to our otherwise serious conversations. So, yes. Gabe, since you have been such a follower of Buddha and Buddhism, it seems only appropriate that we should have a pop quiz on Buddhism in pop culture. Am I guessing correctly, Gabe, that you don't watch a lot of TV, don't watch a lot of movies, don't listen to a lot of pop music?
So. I don't know. I'm not. particularly intense on any of those, but it's not like I'm a hermit either. So I think I'm average.
Well, the room in your background looks pretty sparse, I have to say. Not seeing a big screen TV in there, my friend.
Not here, no.
No. But that will be the purpose for our pop quiz today. It'll give you a little bit of street cred and how you can talk to other people about Buddhism as reflected in pop culture. And for viewers who are watching, hopefully you'll learn a little something about Buddhism and pop culture that you can share with your friends. As always, the points don't matter. The point is to have fun. So if you had fun and you learned something good about Buddhism and pop culture, you won. Are you ready for your first question?
I'm excited. Yeah, let's do
Oh,
this.
good. Your first question is this. Which of these famous actors and actresses identify as Buddhist? And I will warn you in advance, unlike many of our pop quizzes, there is more than one correct answer here. So, which of these famous actors and actresses identify as Buddhist? A. Benedict Cumberbatch. B. Robert Downey Jr. C. Chris Evans. D. Richard Gere. E. Jeff Bridges. F. Jet Li. G. Brad Pitt. Or H. Harrison Ford. Or I. Jennifer Aniston. J. Angelina Jolie. K. Uma Thurman. L. Where are we at? L. Sharon Stone. M. Kate Hudson. N. Lucy Liu. O. Sarah Jessica Parker. Or P. Ming Na Wen. Just out of curiosity, how many of those names do you even know or recognize? Do you know more than like half of those names?
I actually do. I actually do. I don't feel that bad. Even if it's not about getting the right answer, I'm happy that I can recognize more than half of them.
Wow, that's pretty good. I am impressed and surprised. So,
Yeah.
which of those, as far as your best guess would be considered, who there do you think would identify as Buddhist or does?
Oh man, I'm gonna go with A, Benedict Cumberbatch. Um, I don't know who Chris Evans is. Robert Downey Jr. No. Richard Gere. Maybe. I'm gonna say no anyway. Jet Li. Yes. Brad Pitt. Uh, no. I hope you're keeping track. You're the one that put all these names.
Points don't matter, bro. But I'm enjoying this.
Um,
Go ahead.
let's see.
How about Harrison Ford?
No, no, not Harrison Ford. No, I can be. I'm actually surprised that you didn't put Keanu Reeves here. I do know about him. Or Tina Turner.
Too easy.
Oh, okay.
How about on the female side, out of those actresses, who would you guess would identify as Buddhist, if any?
I'll say Sarah Jessica Parker, just randomly, and Uma Thurman.
Nice. Nice. The correct answer is all of them. Every single one of them.
I just thought about it. I just thought about it. I was like, he probably did this. I know he did that.
Trying to psych me out on my own game. I like that. That's good. Yeah, I just Googled up famous actors and actresses who identify as Buddhist, and these are the names that came up. Interestingly enough, I don't think Keanu Reeves' name popped up. Otherwise, I think I would have added it. I'm not sure why that is. Do you know if he is Buddhist? That
I
would not be
remember
surprising.
I remember reading about it. The thing is that um, being a Buddhist is not like not necessarily. It's just so open.
Right,
It's just so open. Like you can just resonate with the idea and say like, yeah, I like
right,
Buddhism.
right. I identify as Buddhist. If I had to put a check in the box on the census, that's what I would do. But I mean,
Mm.
I don't
See?
belong to any Buddhist community and I don't really know that much about Buddhism. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I am Buddhist in a very loose sense of the word. But apparently, all of these folks do. I mean, and they all have links backing up some place where they have said as such. So, yeah, I would think that's pretty
Wow.
interesting for anyone who is a
Yeah.
fan of any of the movies or TV shows that any of these folks have been in. That's kind of a
Yeah.
neat thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
How do you know Benedict Cumberbatch? Didn't think you would know him.
He did Smaug
Yeah,
for from The Hobbit,
right.
and I think he did also this movie. Um, is it DC or Marvel? I think it's Marvel. You know the one I'm talking
Doctor
about?
Strange. Yeah,
Doctor
Marvel.
Strange.
Yeah,
And I
he's
think
great.
even though I didn't watch the show, he was Sherlock Holmes also.
Yeah,
See, I
yeah.
told you I'm not that bad.
I'm impressed. I am super impressed. And
That's
if you
why.
don't know Chris Evans is the actor who is probably most well known for playing Captain America in the Avengers movies, the MCU.
Okay.
So I had no idea he was Buddhist. I had no idea. Like, I think I knew Richard Gere already because he's done quite a bit with Buddhists, and I knew Uma Thurman. Maybe her father was actually like a Buddhist priest or monk,
Mm.
I believe, who wrote
Wow.
quite a bit. Otherwise, yeah, super cool. Are you ready for your next question?
I'm ready.
We are moving out of the movie world into hip hop. Which of the Beastie Boys took the lead in advocating for freedom of Tibetan Buddhists from oppression by the Chinese government? Was it A, Mike D, B, MCA, or C, Ad Rock? Let's start first of all. Do you know who the Beastie Boys are? Do you listen to hip hop at all?
No, I don't.
Have you ever heard of the Beastie Boys?
It sounds familiar, but I think I'm confusing them or confusing the name. Oh,
In the
yeah.
history of hip hop, they're kind of a big deal. They were probably responsible more than anyone else for making hip hop popular with white kids, basically suburban kids, because up to that point in the late 80s, hip hop and rap music was something that was strictly that, black kids, black people were listening to in urban
Mm.
areas. But these guys, it's a beautiful law of one story. They really went through a beautiful evolution of their own and really transformed hip hop big time. They were
Mm.
inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2012, I believe, and only the third act to be. But anyway, one of them, shown in the picture, was actually a very outspoken advocate for freedom of Tibetan Buddhists from oppression by the Chinese government. And they had many concerts benefiting the Tibetan freedom cause. So I think you're just going to have to guess here. Was it Mike D, MCA, or Ad Rock?
See, now I'm conflicted. I want to say all of them. But no,
That
I'm gonna go
is a
with
possibility.
Mike D.
Whoop, are you still there?
Yeah. Did you hear Mike D?
Yeah. No, sorry. Oh, no. Okay. I think your Wi-Fi might have froze for a minute. Mike D. Mike D is
Oh.
the dude on the left, and I suppose eventually all three of them were, in fact, advocates. But it was the dude on the right, MCA or Adam Yauch, who really
Mm.
started it and spearheaded and kind of took the lead on it. And really beautiful soul. Just folks, whoever is watching this who's Beastie Boy fan already, you probably know about MCA and Adam Yauch. Really special person, really incredible spiritual journey he went on, which we can talk about another time for sure. How about your last question?
Let's see.
According to the classic piece of American cinema known as Caddyshack, what did the Dalai Lama say after hitting his golf ball into a glacial crevice? Gotta ask you, have you heard of Caddyshack? Are you aware of Caddyshack at all?
No, not this one.
It's a really lowbrow comedy, which I am sure you would not really find that entertaining or enjoyable. But there's a really funny scene where Bill Murray, who used to be in Saturday Night Live, he's playing the groundskeeper here. He tells a story about caddying for the Dalai Lama, which we'll actually play that clip for in a minute. But according to a story, which was all improvised, it was not in the script. He made up this whole story. And when you watch the kid's face he's interacting with, it's really funny to see how the kid is just trying to go along for the ride on where the story is going. But apparently, Bill Murray, his character, caddied for the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama apparently hit his golf ball into a glacial crevice. So, what, according to Bill Murray, did he say? Was it A, Gunga Galunga, B. Gunga La Gunga, or C. Fuck. This might be the first
I'm gonna
time
go
we've
with
dropped the
C.
F-bomb on this episode, but we've done it on quite a few other episodes. My apologies to viewers who are sensitive to that.
I'm actually gonna go with C.
Nice. Yes, indeed. Well, we're going to have to find the answer by rolling the clip, because if you haven't seen this, you really should. Before I roll it, I should let you know, or our viewers know, this is the first time that I've actually played a movie clip from YouTube on one of these podcasts. So I'm not sure if it's going to get flagged for copyright violations. So viewers, if you don't see the actual clip in a few seconds, you'll know that I had to remove it. Just go to YouTube and look up Caddyshack Dalai Lama and you'll see. Otherwise, this is the story.
So I jump ship in Hong Kong, and I make my way over to Tibet, and I get on as a looper at a course over there in Himalayas.
A looper?
A looper. You know, a caddy, a looper. Jack. So I tell them I'm a pro Jack. And who do you think they give me? The Dalai Lama himself. The 12th son of the Lama. The flowing robes, the grace, bald. Striking. So I'm on the first tee with him. I give him the driver. He hauls off and whacks one. Big hitter, the Lama. Long. Into a 10,000-foot crevice right at the base of this glacier. Do you know what the Lama says?
No.
Gunga Galunga. Gunga La Gunga. So we finish 18, and he's gonna stiff me. And I say, hey, Lama, hey, how about a little something, you know, for the effort, you know? And he says, oh, there won't be any money. But when you die, on your deathbed, you will receive total consciousness. So I got that going for me, which is nice.
Is that a
Oh, my
meme?
word. What's that?
I think that's a meme at the end, isn't it?
Yes, yes. You've probably heard people quote that line or some part of it before.
Mm.
Little did Bill Murray know, he was right. We all receive total consciousness on our deathbed, but yes.
Mm.
So next time you're talking to somebody, you can let them know that you know about the Dalai Lama story from Caddyshack. Your Buddhist friends will be totally impressed. According to the video, I believe the correct answer was B. Originally, I think he started saying Gunga Galunga and said, nope, Gunga La Gunga. So that would be it. Well, once again, my friend, you have squandered 2 hours out of your precious brief incarnation messing around and wasting time with the Seattle Law of One podcast. So we really want to thank you for being here and for your time. Any last goodbyes you want to say to our viewers before we wrap things up?
No, man, I just want to say thank you for hosting this, for being there for people who are in this path, and for sharing your being. We talked about this throughout the whole time. To me, I mean, I didn't even keep, tabs on the time. So I had fun, like you said. That's all that really matters. And yeah, man, thank you for sharing your being, allowing me to share my being, and just giving that inspiration and example to others so that they can continue to do the same, because that's the only thing the world needs. It just needs more people doing whatever they want to do and going through those things that are telling them not to. See them as lies, as falsehood. It's not true. We're here to do everything that we desire, everything that we want. It's just discerning, like we saw here over and over again. What's the choice of love?
So beautiful. Thank you so much indeed. Gabe, thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For everyone watching this on video at some time in the near future or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator. Atane. Namaste.